There is a spiritual principle that governs outcomes in life, and it operates whether a person understands it or not. Many struggle financially, emotionally, and spiritually, not because opportunity is absent, but because their words have been working against them. What you consistently say is not empty sound. It is a force that sets things into motion. When faith-filled words are spoken with conviction, they begin to shape reality. This message reveals how speaking in alignment with truth and belief can transform lack into abundance, limitation into overflow, and hope into tangible results. You must understand something that many people overlook. Words are not empty sounds drifting into the air. Words are containers. They carry substance. They carry power. Every word you speak is planting something in the unseen realm, and whether you realize it or not, those words are moving toward manifestation. Most people speak based on what they see, what they feel, and what they fear, but faith speaks based on what is already established in the spiritual realm. When a person continually says, "I'm broke, I never have enough, money slips through my hands," they are not just describing their situation, they are authorizing it. They are giving it legal ground to stay. Words are like signatures on a contract. Once spoken, they authorize conditions to remain or to change. That's why careless speaking produces consistent lack, while intentional speaking aligned with faith produces increase. Now here is where the shift must happen. You don't wait until you see wealth to say you are wealthy. You say it because it is already yours in the unseen. Faith does not respond to evidence. It creates evidence. When you declare, "I am a multi-millionaire," you are not pretending. You are calling into existence what already belongs to you in the realm of promise. You are aligning your voice with truth that has not yet become visible. There is a law at work here, as consistent as gravity. Just as gravity will pull an object downward every single time, the law of confession will bring into manifestation whatever is consistently spoken and believed. It does not respond to occasional words. It responds to dominant speech, what you say repeatedly, what you say with conviction, what you say when circumstances look the opposite. Many people speak the right thing once and then spend the rest of the day contradicting it. That cancels the effect. The law requires consistency. It requires that your words remain steady even when nothing seems to be changing. Especially then, because the moment nothing appears to be happening is often the moment everything is aligning beneath the surface. When you begin to speak wealth, provision, and abundance, your mind may resist, your senses may argue, your environment may try to prove you wrong. But faith is not moved by any of those things. Faith stands its ground and continues to declare the same truth over and over again until that truth becomes reality. You are not trying to convince other people. You are establishing something within yourself. Your spirit must hear it. Your inner man must be trained to agree with what you are saying. Because once your spirit and your words come into agreement, something powerful begins to happen. Doubt loses its voice, fear loses its grip, and expectation begins to rise. And expectation is the breeding ground of manifestation. When you expect increase, you begin to see opportunities others overlook. You begin to act differently. You begin to make decisions from a place of abundance rather than lack. And those decisions start to produce results that align with what you've been speaking. But it all starts with the words, not weak words, not hesitant words, bold, confident declarations spoken with authority. You must speak as someone who already possesses, not as someone who is hoping to receive. There is a difference between saying, "I will be," and "I am." One postpones, the other activates. Every time you say, "I am a multimillionaire," you are enforcing a reality in the unseen. You are placing a demand on circumstances to align. You are reshaping your internal belief system. You are programming your mind to reject lack and accept abundance. And over time, that internal shift begins to reflect outwardly in ways that cannot be stopped or reversed. There is a difference between wishing for change and establishing change, and that difference is authority. Many people speak words casually, almost as if they are hoping something might happen someday, but faith does not speak in hope alone. It speaks with authority, as one who understands that what is spoken carries force. When you begin to declare something over your life, especially in the area of provision and increase, you are not making a request. You are issuing a decree. A decree is not weak. It is not uncertain. It is not based on how things look at the moment. A decree is spoken from a position of certainty, and that certainty comes from knowing that there are spiritual laws already in motion. When you align your words with those laws, you are no longer trying to make something happen. You are cooperating with what is already designed to work. That's why your tone matters. That's why your conviction matters. You cannot speak like a beggar and expect kingly results. Too many people approach life as if everything is outside of them, as if they are at the mercy of circumstances, economies, or opportunities. But when you understand the authority of your words, you begin to realize that you are not a victim of your environment. You are a voice within it, and that voice has the ability to shape outcomes. Not instantly, not magically, but progressively and consistently as it is exercised. Authority grows through use. If you never use it, you will never become confident in it. That's why it may feel uncomfortable at first to say something like, "I am a multi-millionaire," especially when your current condition appears far from it. Your mind may try to pull you back into familiar patterns. It may tell you to be realistic, to speak only what you see. But if you only speak what you see, you will never change what you see. Faith speaks beyond the present condition and into the desired outcome. It calls things that are not as though they already exist. That is not denial. It is alignment. You are aligning your words with a higher reality that has not yet become visible. And as you continue to speak from that place, something begins to shift inside you. Your confidence starts to build. Your expectation starts to solidify. You begin to carry yourself differently because your internal language has changed. And once your internal language changes, your external behavior follows. You begin to make choices that reflect the person you have been declaring yourself to be. You start to see value where you once saw limitation. You begin to recognize opportunities that were always there but went unnoticed because your mindset was conditioned by lack. Your words start opening doors in your thinking before they ever open doors in your circumstances. But authority requires discipline. You cannot speak one way in moments of inspiration and then revert back in moments of pressure. Pressure reveals what you truly believe. When challenges arise, when bills increase, when unexpected situations occur, that is when your words matter the most. That is when you must refuse to speak defeat. That is when you must stand firm and continue declaring abundance, even when everything around you suggests otherwise, because every time you choose to speak in alignment with faith instead of fear, you are strengthening that authority within you. You are training yourself to operate from a place of dominion rather than reaction. You are refusing to let circumstances dictate your language. Instead, you are allowing your language to dictate your circumstances. And as this becomes a habit, not just something you do occasionally, but something you live by daily, your words begin to carry weight. They are no longer empty repetitions. They are charged with belief, backed by consistency, and supported by expectation. People may not understand it. They may question it. But what matters is that you continue to speak, continue to declare, continue to enforce what you know to be true within you until the unseen begins to take form and align itself with every word you have spoken with. Unwavering authority. What you consistently hear yourself say will eventually become what you believe about yourself. And what you believe about yourself will shape every decision you make. This is why confession is not just about speaking outwardly. It is about reprogramming inwardly. The words you allow to come out of your mouth are the same words your mind absorbs and your spirit responds to. You are, in a very real sense, training yourself with your own voice. Most people have been conditioned over time to think in terms of limitation. They've heard it from family, from society, from past experiences, and without realizing it, they have built an internal language of lack. Even when they try to move forward, That internal voice pulls them back, reminding them of what they cannot do, what they do not have, and what has not worked before. That voice becomes a barrier, not because it is true, but because it is familiar. When you begin to speak words of abundance and increase, you are interrupting that pattern. You are introducing a new language into your system, and at first it may feel unnatural. It may sound too big, too bold, too far removed from your current reality. But repetition has power. The more you say it, the more it settles within you. The more it settles within you, the more it begins to feel normal. And once it feels normal, it begins to feel true. This is how belief is formed, not overnight, but through consistent exposure. Just as negative thinking was built over time, through repeated words and experiences, positive, faith-filled thinking must also be built the same way. You cannot speak one or two declarations and expect your entire mindset to change. It requires persistence. It requires that you continue speaking, even when you don't feel it yet, even when your emotions are not in agreement. Your emotions are not the leader here. Your words are. If you wait until you feel confident before you speak confidently, you will wait indefinitely. But if you choose to speak confidently first, your feelings will eventually align with what you have been saying. Words lead, feelings follow. That is the order that produces change. As you continue this process, something begins to happen beneath the surface. Your mind starts to accept what you are saying as a possibility, then as a probability, and eventually as a certainty. Once it reaches that point, your actions begin to reflect it. You no longer hesitate in the same way. You no longer shrink back from opportunities. You begin to step forward with a sense of expectation because internally you have already accepted a new identity. And identity is powerful. When you see yourself as someone who prospers, someone who increases, someone who has more than enough, your decisions will align with that identity. You will manage resources differently. You will pursue opportunities differently. You will respond to challenges differently. All of this begins not with external change, but with internal agreement. That agreement is built through words, spoken over and over again, deliberately and consistently. Not just when it feels good, but especially when it doesn't. Because the moments when it feels difficult to speak positively are the moments when the old patterns are trying to hold their ground, and every time you speak against those patterns, you are weakening them and strengthening the new direction you are establishing within yourself over time. Your voice becomes the dominant influence in your life, louder than doubt, stronger than fear, more consistent than past conditioning, shaping your thinking, directing your focus, reinforcing your identity, and steadily aligning your inner world with the reality you have been declaring again and again until it becomes the only reality you can truly accept. There is a direct connection between what you say and what you allow to take root in your life, because words do more than express. They authorize. Every time you speak, you are granting permission for something to remain or for something to change. Most people don't realize that they have been giving silent approval to the very conditions they want to escape, simply by repeating them day after day, reinforcing them with their own voice. When you say, "This is just how my life is," or "I guess things will never change," you are not just describing your reality, you are establishing it. You are placing a stamp of acceptance on something that should have been challenged. Words like that create boundaries, invisible but powerful, limiting what you believe is possible and what you expect to happen next. And once those boundaries are in place, your mind begins to operate within them, never stretching beyond what has already been spoken. That is why changing your confession is not optional if you want a different outcome. It is essential. You must begin to speak in a way that refuses to authorize lack, refuses to tolerate limitation, refuses to agree with anything that contradicts the life you are meant to walk in. This is not about ignoring facts. It is about refusing to give those facts the final say. There is a higher truth that must take precedence, and that truth must come out of your mouth consistently. When you declare abundance, when you speak increase, when you say, "I am a multimillionaire," You are doing more than making a bold statement. You are withdrawing authorization from every form of lack that has tried to settle in your life. You are cutting off its legal right to remain. You are saying, in effect, this condition no longer has permission to stay here. And that kind of speaking begins to shift things, not always visibly at first, but powerfully beneath the surface. Because anything that remains in your life must have agreement. It must have cooperation. And if your words are no longer cooperating with lack, then lack begins to lose its place. It begins to weaken. It begins to unravel, not because of a single statement, but because of repeated, consistent declarations that leave no room for contradiction. But this requires awareness. You must become conscious of what you are saying throughout the day, not just during moments of intentional confession, but in casual conversation, in private thoughts spoken aloud, in reactions to situations. Because it is often in those unguarded moments that your true beliefs are revealed. And if those moments are filled with words of doubt, fear, or limitation, they will quietly rebuild what you are trying to tear down. So you train yourself to speak differently at all times. You correct yourself when necessary. You refuse to let negative statements pass unchecked. You become intentional, deliberate, focused on ensuring that every word aligns with the direction you have chosen. This is discipline, but it is also empowerment. Because the more consistent you become, the more authority your words begin to carry. And as that authority grows, you start to notice a shift, not just in your thinking, but in how situations respond. Doors that once seemed closed begin to open. Opportunities begin to appear. Ideas begin to flow. It is not coincidence. It is alignment. Your words have created an internal environment that is now attracting and producing external results that match it. This is why you cannot afford to speak loosely. Every word matters. Every statement contributes to something. You are either reinforcing the old or establishing the new. There is no neutral ground. And once you understand that, you begin to treat your words with the seriousness they deserve, recognizing that what you consistently authorize with your voice will eventually take form in your life, shaping your experiences, directing your outcomes, and defining the reality you continue to live in. Day after day, what you repeatedly declare does not just influence your thinking, it sets a direction for your life. Words are not isolated events. They are signals. They point your focus somewhere, and wherever your focus goes, your energy follows. Most people don't realize that they are directing their own lives daily through the patterns of their speech. They are unconsciously steering themselves toward the very outcomes they claim they don't want, simply because their words are aligned with fear instead of faith. When you begin to speak differently, you begin to move differently. At first, it may seem subtle, almost unnoticeable, but over time the effect becomes undeniable. Your words start shaping your expectations, and your expectations begin shaping your actions. You start waking up with a different mindset. Instead of anticipating struggle, you anticipate opportunity. Instead of expecting lack, you expect provision. And that expectation changes how you approach your day. You become more aware of possibilities. You start recognizing moments that could turn into something greater. Where you once hesitated, you begin to step forward. Where you once doubted, you begin to consider, what if this is part of the increase I've been declaring? That shift in thinking leads to a shift in behavior, and that behavior leads to results that align with your new direction. But understand this clearly. The words themselves are not magic formulas. It is the consistency, the belief, and the alignment behind those words that give them power. Anyone can repeat a phrase, but not everyone will commit to it long enough to see it take root. There will be moments when nothing seems to be changing, when the results are not visible, when circumstances appear to contradict everything you've been saying. That is where most people stop. That is where they go back to speaking what they see instead of what they believe. But if you remain steady, something begins to build beneath the surface. Your words begin to form a new pattern, a new rhythm in your life. That rhythm starts influencing your decisions, in ways you may not even fully notice at first. You begin to choose differently how you spend your time, how you handle resources, how you respond to opportunities. And those choices, repeated over time, create a pathway that leads exactly where your words have been pointing. You are, in essence, becoming the person you have been declaring yourself to be, not instantly, but progressively. Layer by layer, decision by decision, your life starts aligning with the identity you have accepted internally. And because identity drives behavior, and behavior produces results, your external world begins to reflect that internal shift. This is why you must stay committed to what you are saying, even when progress feels slow, because every declaration is laying a brick. Every repetition is reinforcing a structure. You may not see the full picture yet, but something is being built. Something is taking shape. And the more consistent you are, the stronger that structure becomes. Eventually, there comes a point where the results begin to surface. Not all at once, but in ways that confirm that something has changed. Opportunities increase, connections form, ideas expand, resources begin to flow in ways that were not present before. And when that happens, you realize that your words were not empty. They were directional. They were guiding you, shaping you, leading you step by step into the very reality you have been declaring, aligning your actions, sharpening your focus, strengthening your expectation, and steadily moving you toward a life that reflects the abundance you have consistently spoken into existence. There is a timing element to everything that is established through faith-filled words, and this is where many people lose their footing. They start strong, they speak boldly, they declare what they desire, but when time passes and nothing appears to change, they begin to waver. They assume that because they cannot see immediate results, nothing is happening. But what they fail to understand is that words, once spoken with belief, enter a process. They begin working beneath the surface long before they become visible. Just like a seed planted in the ground, there is a period where all the activity is hidden. You don't see roots forming. You don't see the initial growth. But that does not mean nothing is taking place. In fact, the unseen phase is where the most critical development occurs. If you were to dig up the seed every day just to check its progress, you would interrupt the very process you are expecting to produce results. In the same way, constantly doubting, questioning, and reversing your words disrupts the development of what you have been declaring. Patience is not passive. It is active consistency. It is continuing to say the same thing, believe the same thing, and expect the same outcome, even when there is no visible confirmation. This is where discipline becomes essential, because during this phase, your senses will try to convince you to stop. They will point to your current situation as proof that your words are not working. They will try to pull you back into old patterns of speech that feel more real, but are actually reinforcing the very conditions you are trying to change. You must recognize that this is a test of alignment. Will you remain consistent with what you have declared, or will you allow temporary appearances to dictate your language? Because the moment you go back to speaking, lack doubt, or limitation, you interrupt the flow you had already started. It's not that the process disappears, it's that you begin sending mixed signals. And those mixed signals delay what could have been established sooner. Consistency over time creates momentum, and momentum is powerful. Once your words, your belief, and your expectation begin moving in the same direction without interruption, something begins to accelerate. What once felt slow starts to pick up speed. What once seemed distant begins to come closer, not because anything suddenly changed in that moment, but because the accumulation of your consistency has reached a point where it can no longer remain hidden. But you don't wait for that moment to believe. You believe all the way through. You speak all the way through. You remain steady, refusing to be moved by what you see or don't see, because you understand that what you are building is not dependent on immediate evidence. It is dependent on unwavering agreement between your words and your belief. During this time, it is also important to guard your environment. The voices you listen to, the conversations you engage in, the thoughts you entertain, all of these can either support your consistency or weaken it. If you surround yourself with doubt, it becomes harder to remain firm. But if you reinforce yourself with truth, with reminders of what you are declaring, you strengthen your ability to stay aligned. So you continue, day after day, speaking the same declaration. I am a multi-millionaire, not as a routine, not as empty repetition, but as a settled conviction. You allow no contradiction. You entertain no alternative. You remain fixed, rooted, unshaken. And as time passes, what was once unseen begins to take form. What was once developing in silence begins to emerge. And what you have consistently spoken begins to align with your life in ways that reflect the persistence of your words, the steadiness of your belief, and the unwavering commitment you maintained throughout the entire process. There comes a point where what you have been consistently speaking is no longer something you are trying to believe. It becomes something you know. It moves from repetition into revelation, from effort into certainty. And that shift changes everything, because now you are no longer speaking to convince yourself. You are speaking from a place of inner conviction that cannot be shaken by circumstances, opinions, or delays. At the beginning, your words may have felt like a discipline, something you had to remind yourself to do, something you had to stay conscious of throughout the day. But as you continue, those same words begin to settle deep within you. They become part of your thinking, part of your identity, part of how you see yourself and your future. You don't have to force them anymore. They rise naturally because they reflect what you truly believe. And when belief reaches that level, your confidence becomes evident, not in a loud or boastful way, but in a steady, unwavering assurance. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently in conversations. You respond differently to challenges. There's a calm expectation within you that does not need external validation. You are no longer reacting to life. You are operating from a position that you have already established internally. This is where alignment becomes complete. Your words, your thoughts, your expectations, and your actions are all moving in the same direction. There is no internal conflict, no hesitation, no second guessing. And because there is no contradiction within you, there is nothing to delay what you have been building. Everything begins to flow more naturally, more consistently, more powerfully. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach begin to appear within your path. Connections begin to form without forced effort. Ideas come with clarity and direction. You recognize moments of increase when they show up, because you have trained yourself to expect them. And instead of questioning whether you are ready, you step into them with confidence, knowing that they are part of what you have been declaring all along. At this stage, your words carry a different weight. They are no longer just declarations. They are confirmations. You are affirming what has already taken root within you and is now expressing itself outwardly. And because your inner world has been so thoroughly established, your outer world has no choice but to follow that same pattern. You also begin to notice that fear has lost its influence. Situations that once would have caused hesitation no longer hold that same power. Doubt may attempt to surface, but it does not stay because it has no foundation to stand on. Your belief system has been strengthened through consistent speaking, consistent expectation, and consistent alignment, leaving no room for conflicting voices to take hold. And as this becomes your way of living, not just something you practice, but something you embody, your results begin to reflect it more clearly. Not as isolated moments, but as a pattern of increase, a steady flow that matches the consistency you have maintained. You see the connection between what you have been saying and what is now unfolding, and that recognition reinforces your conviction even further. So you continue to speak, not out of necessity, but out of identity. You continue to declare, not because you are trying to reach something, but because you are expressing something that is already established within you. And everything you do, every decision you make, every opportunity you step into, begins to align with that identity, reinforcing it, expanding it, and manifesting it in ways that reflect the unbroken consistency of your words, the clarity of your belief, and the complete agreement you have maintained within yourself. Over time, what you have seen through every part of this message is not a method built on chance, but a principle built on consistency. It begins with words, but it does not end there. It moves from words into belief, from belief into identity, and from identity into manifestation. At every stage, the same truth remains. What you consistently say, you eventually become aligned with. You started by speaking when it felt unnatural, declaring what you could not yet see. You continued by holding your ground when nothing seemed to change. You trained your inner voice, reshaped your thinking, and refused to authorize anything that contradicted the direction you chose. Over time, those words stopped being something you were trying to believe and became something you knew. This is where the real shift happens. When your words and your belief become one, there is no resistance left within you, no double-mindedness, no hesitation. And when that internal alignment is complete, your external world begins to follow the same pattern. Not by accident, not by luck, but by the steady, unwavering agreement you maintained within yourself. You are no longer speaking to create something. You are speaking from what has already been established inside you. And that is the highest level of faith, when your confession is not an effort, but an expression of who you have become. So you continue to speak. You continue to declare. You continue to live in alignment with every word you have planted, because now you understand that your voice is not just describing your life. It is directing it, shaping it, and bringing it into alignment with the reality you have chosen to establish through unwavering, consistent confession